His crime shocked the world, but many of us were shocked once again when infamous serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer was murdered just last week in a Wisconsin prison. The man being held as the primary suspect is inmate Christopher Scarver. Welcome, everybody. We're live today from New York City, and we're going to be talking about the life and death of mass murderer Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey's father and his stepmother are going to be joining us later in the show to tell us how they're coping with the murder of their son. But first, our other guests. We have some guests here who are also affected very much by the Dahmer murder. Rita Isbell's brother, Errol, was one of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. You may remember her from her dramatic outburst at Dahmer's trial. Janie Hagen's brother, Richard, was also murdered by Dahmer. Also joining us is attorney Thomas Jacobson. Thomas is representing some of the victims' families in a suit against Jeffrey Dahmer. We'll see how you're going to handle that now that Jeffrey Dahmer is gone. I'd like to welcome all of you here today. My first question, of course, is when you heard the news that Jeffrey Dahmer had been killed in prison by an inmate, what was your first reaction? How did your family react to this? Janie?
Well, I was really, excited about the whole death because, it's about time. He just needed to die, And to me, I was really excited, and I said that I was going to send a thank you card to the person who killed him, and that's my thought on that.
Rita, what was your reaction?
I wanted him to die the way that he murdered all of our loved ones. I wanted skulls here, arms over there, legs over here. I wanted him to die the exact same way.
Right.
Yeah. The audience before the show began, what was their reaction? And many of them said we applauded. We were happy about that. Yeah. Can we go back, Rita? Your brother was one of the many victims. Exactly what happened? Can you tell us in your own words what happened to your brother?
As far as him coming up missing, he left home on April 7th to go to a key shop, which was a couple of blocks away from where Jeffrey Dahmer lived. And at that time, my brother lived a couple of blocks from where Jeffrey Dahmer lived. He met Jeffrey Dahmer on the way to the key shop. Jeffrey Dahmer approached him about some odd jobs. My brother went in to go and have the key made. Jeffrey Dahmer waited outside for him. He told my brother to come back to his apartment with him for more information. He took my brother through the back entrance of the apartment building, offered my brother a beer, put the sleeping potion in the beer. I think he said that my brother took just one sip and my brother was out. While my brother was out, he drilled a hole in his head, poured some acid into the hole to, make him a zombie-like. It didn't work, so then he killed him. He strangled him, and then dismembered the body and saved his skull and painted it.
How does your family move on beyond images like this? Do you ever get over anything like that?
No, and we never will.
You can't get over it, Rolonda, because it's not like any other death where you kind of give them a funeral and everything, and you kind of want to put things behind you, and you don't come across people that are constantly reminding you of the death. Like with Jeffrey Dahmer, it's constantly going. No matter what you try to do, you just can't.
The father comes out with a book. We're going to talk to the father later.
With the book, you've got trading cards, you've had movies. There's just a constant reminder and everything. And like I said, I am just really upset that the fact that everybody has been making money off of my loved one's death. They're not sharing it with me. And that's the bottom line.
You families have gotten no money whatsoever out of all the money being made on trading cards and stories being sold and all of those different things. You have not made 1 cent.
Nope. They're the ones that are making all the money, and they get the gain, we get the pain, and that's not right. And I'm really tired of it. And I've seen so many people in Milwaukee, just regular news reporters and journalists that they got promoted to better jobs and everything.
Because they broke the story, because they had an exclusive interview.
Yeah.
The rest.
They snatched up on the opportunity, came out with a book, and just started making money and not sharing it with the families, and that's got to stop.
Tell us what happened to your brother.
Okay, Richard disappeared March 24th, 1988. He was 21 years old, and you know, he was just like any other, you know, regular youth, you know, out to party a Saturday night, and he just never came home. And 3 weeks after, you know, I mean, three days later, you know, we had reported him missing and everything, and you know, we were like constant at the police department saying, hey, this is not just some kid that just decided to disappear. I mean, something happened. And you know, we're Mexican and everything, and you know, they kind of like just gave us the brush off. Oh, well, maybe he got involved in a gang, and you know, or something. He'll return, and I was just always pushing it, you know, and everything. But he had been missing for 3 years before.
3 years?
3 whole years before this story hit. So my brother was never found in the apartment. There's no remains on him. So it was just a sad situation, and you know, there's too many victims died because of their mistake. I blame the city
The
for
city?
all the murders.
Why?
Yes.
The city of Milwaukee, you blame?
The city of Milwaukee, the police department, because there was a pattern going. See, there's a lot of people that don't know really, you know, what's going on in Milwaukee. You know, I'm sure that, I don't want to sound like a racist or anything, but there's a lot of stuff happening over there, you know, and there's just a lot of stuff that people just don't care.
For almost a decade, these murders were going on.
Right.
These boys were disappearing. Nobody knew where they were. And you watched with the rest of the nation as this Jeffrey Dahmer was booked and all these revelations came out. I bet you never dreamed that your brother would be on those lists, both of them.
Right. Yeah. You know, it was like, you know, they found 11 bodies in the apartment and everything, and, you know, Richard's remains were never found.
You know, on this topic, and I will address some of the other things directly related to Jeffrey Dahmer, but I think that there is an urgent need for a national organization of victim rights advocates that could be organized, because I believe if something like that was in place, when you have these serial murder victim patterns emerging, what happens now is the victims end up going to the police. Well, you know who your major victims are? They come from your minority communities. How much do the police really care about minority communities?
Thomas, let's continue this conversation, because I think I'd also like to know how these families, I know that many of you have filed a lawsuit up to some $10 million against Jeffrey Dahmer, who is no longer with us. What's going to happen with these families as more things are sold? And we're going to talk about the auction of some of the things in Jeffrey Dahmer's home that came out that they're thinking about making money on. Let's talk about all this. Later in the show, we're going to talk with Jeffrey Dahmer's parents, who have an awful lot to say to the victims' families. It is their first time coming on a talk show since the death of their son. But when we come back, Rita is going to tell us what happened that day in court. All of us watched you when you had that outburst, when you came face to face with your brother's killer. We'll be back in a moment.
We have no sex life at all now.
The birth of a baby doesn't have to mean the end of your sex life. Watch the next Rolonda. Welcome back, everybody. If you're just joining us, we're coming to you live today from New York City. And before we talk to Jeffrey Dahmer's parents, for the first time they're making an appearance on a talk show since their son was murdered in prison. We're going to continue talking to the families of some of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims. We have a phone call, Teresa from Pennsylvania. Hello, Teresa.
Hello. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good, Rolonda.
What do you have to say, Teresa?
Well, what I basically have to say is that my cousin was a victim of Jeffrey Dahmer, and the saddest part of I'm happy that the man was murdered. He deserved to be murdered. What I feel terrible about is that we never got to see her remains. We have no idea what has really truly happened, and we never will know because of this murder. But the man deserved what he got.
How has your family dealt after this? Because it's not just the immediate family. We're talking with sisters of two victims. You call as a cousin, Teresa, and I'm sure they're grandparents, neighbors, friends.
Yes, we've gotten a lot of mixed reaction from neighbors and friends. We originally, when this happened, my cousin unfortunately got into prostitution, and so a lot of people looked at her as though it was something that she almost deserved because of what she had unfortunately gotten into. But that was a terrible reaction for us. What we're getting now basically is people are coming around now and realizing what an animal this person was and what he really did deserve. And our family is grieving and will always grieve because we don't know what her last days were like. We don't know what she was feeling. And there's a lot of unanswered questions.
All right. Teresa, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rolonda.
Is there any kind of comfort that comes in any strange kind of way in having so many different victims? There's so many families that can bond together under this horrible situation, but does it give you any type of relief or comfort when you hear from a Teresa that you have each other, that there are other victims' families? Janie?
Yes, it does give you comfort that, you know, that we don't need anybody's sympathy, but, you know, we need everybody's support, you know, for the families.
Because I think that all of us were touched by the Jeffrey Dahmer situation, and I just wondered if the grieving of all of us gives you some support at all.
It does.
Yeah. Rich is calling from Rhode Island. Hello, Rich.
Hi.
You say what?
Well, I say that I think Jeffrey Dahmer got off easy by getting killed because now he's resting in peace, whereas if he was in prison, he'd be suffering every day for the rest of his life, living in fear, living in that constant fear. I've been in prison, and prison's not an easy place to be. So I figure by him being killed, he's just like got off the hook.
He was sentenced to 999 years in prison.
Right, and I believe he should have served every one of them days alive and suffering and living in fear.
Okay.
Yeah, like Rolonda, I've always said that I don't believe in the death penalty, but I'm referring that to depending on the crime, on what the person does. Like with Jeffrey Dahmer, that was an easy death. Even what happened to him in prison, I mean, he deserved a slow death.
Jeffrey
That's how
Dahmer
I feel.
himself, if you'll remember, said, I deserve to die. I deserve the death penalty.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to say, too, is I don't know if you heard the father and the mother, you know, they're discussing about the ashes, you know, what they should do with the ashes and everything. We didn't even get a body to bury. We had to give a memorial service, 2 memorial services with just a picture. You know, that's got to be the saddest thing in the world. And I just wanted to say something about the ashes. What they ought to do is they should crush, I mean, they should just flush that down a toilet and get vomit on, because that's what he did to the victims.
I know that you guys had mentioned that part of Jeffrey Dahmer's whole thing, he wanted to make zombies out of people so he could have sex slaves in his house. He ate hearts. He had body parts all around. When you were sitting in court as a family member listening to this, what happened to your brother, you can imagine the emotions. Before we go on, I want to take a look. Let's go back to a scene I don't think any of us can forget, the day that Rita was in court.
My name is Rita Isbell, and I'm the oldest sister of Errol Lindsay. Whatever your name is, Satan. I'm mad. This is how you act when you are out of control. I don't want to ever see my mother have to go through this again. Never, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I hate you, mother. I hate you. This is out of control. Don't with me, Jeffrey. I kill you. God damn it. Look at me, mother. I can kill you.
What should they pass?
I can kill you, mother. Don't with me in my phone. You don't have to.
What are you thinking, Rita?
Every time I see that, I can just visualize myself in that courtroom all over again. I don't think the public realized what the family members had to go through in that courtroom just to listen to each and every one of what happened to each and every one of our victims, one at a time. I was angry. They made me go last. I was raised in hell in that courtroom from day one. We were in there from sun up to sundown. When it was finally my turn to get up there, after listening to all the other family members, they had prepared speeches. I didn't prepare a speech. I had no idea what I was going to say or what I was going to do. But that was my very first time seeing his face and that close to him. It was like the evil in me came out, and it was like evil to evil. And he knew that I was just as a bigger devil than he was. And if I had gotten to him, Rolonda, I would have been in the penitentiary.
We'll be right back.
racially motivated. It was not sexual preference. It was just to find an obsession with the best-looking young man I could find.
We're live today from New York City. We're talking with the families of Jeffrey Dahmer's victims, and in just a minute we're going to be talking with Jeffrey Dahmer's parents, their first time coming on a talk show since their son was murdered in a Wisconsin prison. You had a comment. I guess you were just as moved as the rest of us watching Rita in court that day. You have what to say?
Very moved. I just wanted to commend you for your bravery on coming out here today and speaking. I'm sure every time you talk about it hurts, but maybe also helps. Just want you to know we're all with you.
We are with you. That's very good. How do you move on? I mean, because a lot of us are really in awe that you have so much courage to do what you're doing today. Where do you get that from? How do you keep on with your lives?
Well, it was hard before his death, but since his death has happened, we're going to turn this into a business, and we know that he wouldn't like that. So this is our way of getting back at him.
Right. Because all the money in the world would never be able to, you know, bring our loved ones back or anything, you know, but he owes me. The city owes me, the police department owes me, they all owe me money.
So you're angry.
Money or whatever.
We're very angry.
We're really upset about the whole thing.
And we're going to fight just in case if this had happened again, which when we finish, I don't think whoever tries to commit a hideous crime like this will think twice, because we're going to put a stop to this.
Because there's always going to be another Jeffrey Dahmer out there. He's probably running around the streets right now, but he hasn't got discovered. So we are here to educate the public, you know, as victims. We're the victims. We've always been victimized by everybody.
Because you know something, this could happen to any of us. Nobody's immune
Everyone
to this.
here in this audience is a target.
You said that you weren't real happy with the way you were treated in court during that whole case either.
No,
we were just treated awful. You know, we couldn't have showed any emotions, or else the lawyers will call it outbursts. But then you can get the general public in there that were admirers of the serial killer, and they can say whatever they wanted to say, but the families weren't allowed to say anything.
And we were very exhausted. The trial started from sun up until sundown. We were there every day. We couldn't go to sleep. We couldn't show no emotion. Even the judge went to sleep. He was actually sitting there asleep. When we dozed off, the sheriff would come over there and tap us, and if he had to come twice, he would escort us out of the courtroom. Before we got to the courtroom, we had to be searched. But Sherry and Lionel Dahmer had reserved seats. They had private entry. I didn't understand that. We are the victims, not them. It's their son that did this to us.
Right, we were treated like the criminals. That's how we were treated in court.
From the audience.
Well, on that last statement about how you were treated in court, I'd just like to say thank you for the 25-year-old inmate who took care of this little problem for us. Secondly, to the attorney, I'd like to know what type of monetary gain are these families going to receive, seeing how there's really nothing left now but monetary gain.
That isn't true. We've got judgments already for the 8 families that I represent, and $10 million against Jeffrey Dahmer. Other families have gotten judgments. I want to make a couple points. The families all have to stick together. Any efforts I do for my 8 families, it applies equally to all the families. Now, what we have, the one thing that we can do to get money for the families is get the artifacts that were in Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment when he was arrested. That's in police custody now. I want that property. I want it sold at a public auction. It's got to be here in New York. This is where it all happens. We're going to have an auction of all Jeffrey Dahmer's property. This is going to be
now,
what we call
Thomas, you're talking about drills, you're talking about chainsaws, you're talking about residue left on carpets.
Everything.
Everything. Pails.
Rolonda, what Jeffrey Dahmer did to my brother, I don't care if I have to sell his tooth. Okay? Because that's just how I feel.
There will also be, this is gross, but this is the reality. There's also the painted skull you talked about. The skeleton. Is that part of what you're talking about?
We draw the line on the pictures and that type of thing.
Okay.
It's going to be the concrete property, like it's going to be the vat, the refrigerator, the hypodermic needle, the handcuffs. We got videos that he used to watch. The Exorcist, where
The Exorcist 3 is where he got his...
He was doing in his victims, that type of thing. We're going to draw the line on some items. I want to say one thing. The overall thing you must remember when the Dahmers come on. Jeffrey Dahmer lied, and lied. Just keep that in mind when you listen to the Dahmer family. What this is about is who gets the money, who profits off of serial crimes and murders. Is it going to be the murderer and his family, or is it going to be the victims? And we got to be on the side of the victims, and that's what I'm all about.
And when we come right back, we'll talk to Mr. and Mrs. Dahmer. We'll be back in a moment.
So why I don't have the death penalty. Death would be preferable to years of nothingness spent here.
We're coming to you live today from New York City, and we're talking about and getting reactions about the recent murder of Jeffrey Dahmer, the serial killer, murdered just last week in a Wisconsin prison, allegedly by another inmate. It seems as if many people are thinking about the victims' families at a time like this. But Jeffrey Dahmer, we must remember, also had a family that loved him very much, despite all the revelations that even surprised them in that courtroom. Joining us now is Jeffrey's father, Lionel, and his stepmother, Shari. And we're happy that both of you decided to come back on our show. Thank you very much. How are you dealing with this, the murder of your own son?
We're getting a lot of support from people. In general, from Sherry. This is where I derive my strength, from Sherry and from God. And when I heard about this at work, Sherry had phoned me, and I just reacted with numbness, and I started making sounds that were hardly intelligible, sobbing, and Sherry phoned another extension and got Hal and Craig to be with me, my office mates, and I just couldn't believe that he was dead. We were going to visit him this coming weekend.
Shari, what was your reaction?
I received the phone call from a prison official stating that Jeff had been injured and he was on his way to the hospital. I was standing at my kitchen sink doing dishes, and I felt in my heart that he was gone. I didn't sense his presence. Then I received the phone call a short time later saying that he had died, in fact.
Was this something you might have feared all along, that there would be retaliation?
We always thought that there would be a possibility of something happening to Jeff in prison, and he felt so also. And I think I was lulled somewhat after that first attack by the razor blade in July by this other person. I was lulled by a statement made by a chaplain there saying that it was going to really be tight now. They're really going to watch. And the first reaction I felt when I heard about Jeff's death was just guilt. I mean, I felt like I should have called the prison officials and just sort of periodically asked them, what are you doing, how is security, and so forth. And I didn't. I was really lulled by that statement, and so was Roy Ratcliffe, I believe, the minister who baptized Jeff into Christ recently.
I know that Rita had told one of our producers, Rita being the sister of one of the victims, had gotten some mysterious phone calls. She thought from prison inmates who were saying, everything's going to be taken care of. It seems as if there had been, based upon that, some type of plot heading toward that.
I don't know. All I know is that it couldn't have been done by one person. I mean, I feel that in my heart. An investigation's still going on, and I haven't gotten any information really of any substance or extent.
So everything's allegation at this point and suspicion. Yes. When you say Jeffrey Dahmer has been killed in prison, it seems for most folk it's an applause. It's good. I'm glad. He deserved it. When you hear those things, what does that do to you, to your heart? You're one of the few, I will say, who is not applauding.
Well, you know, I feel their pain much more deeply now even than when I sat in the courtroom during his trial in 1991. I heard everything for the first time there, and now that my son is gone, I can even feel more deeply what they're feeling. But one of my first reactions after guilt was anger after hearing that Jeff was killed and the way that he was killed. I felt anger and frustration because in the past year he has worked with a minister there, and all I can say is if people really want an objective opinion as to what we're all about and what Jeff was all about in the last year, I would ask them to contact Teresa, not the one that called from Pennsylvania, but the one in Milwaukee, who has become our dear friend.
What do you say to the families? If they're listening to the show now, people who knew these victims, people who are in such pain over such gruesome murders, what do you say to those people now?
I sympathize tremendously and deeply with. I feel that loss. I feel that terrible, empty gut feeling. I have it now. I know that they had it and still have it. But I felt also it was really a waste. I mean, in the last year, I don't know if you saw a headline recently, I think it was in USA Today. It said Jeff had a death wish and he didn't have the gumption to do it, something like that. Well, that was true back about a year and a half ago. He secreted a razor blade into the cell, and he really did, I believe, would have the gumption to have done it.
And the reason he didn't?
But here's the main point. He has really he really has believed and been baptized into Christ. He really was walking the walk in the past year and a half. And I felt it was it's a waste.
Okay.
But he's safe now, I feel.
When we come back, there was the attorneys and the victims and a reaction from the audience. When we come back, we'll get your reaction to that, and also the talk about money, how these families are going to be compensated for their pain. We'll be back in just a minute.
Blame's sitting right across from you. That's the only person. Not parents, not society, not pornography. I mean, those are just excuses.
Live today from New York City, we're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer and getting a reaction to his recent murder. We're talking with his parents and victims' families. Our 800 number's on your screen. Join our conversation. When we were last talking before the break, Mr. and Mrs. Dahmer were talking about how in the last year, Jeffrey Dahmer had changed. He had found God, he had found the Bible, and you had a really strong reaction over here. What were you thinking?
I tell you right now, your son dying was too good for him. I would have sliced him just like he sliced everybody else. Let him suffer. Let him feel the pain.
And they were discussing, I don't know if it was current affair or Inside Edition about ashes. For all I care is ash can go on my toilet bowl. It was too good for him, I tell you that much. I have a nephew 20 years old. I would have shot him in court. I would have shot him in court.
There's the question of the ashes. You want the ashes of Jeffrey Dahmer, and another part of the family does too. Can you tell us about that? Update us on what's happened there?
There never really was, as far as I'm concerned, an issue over the ashes. That was something that came out of Milwaukee or somewhere. His ashes to me are nothing. That's not his spirit. He's gone. The natural thing to do, I suppose, if you want to do anything, is just to split the ashes between the natural parents.
Okay.
So that's.
Mary is calling from Florida. Hello, Mary.
Hi, I'm a retired officer from Waupun, Wisconsin, at male maximum security prison, and I used to transfer officers over where Jeffrey was at Dodge. I will tell you, Rolonda, that there is no officer within the system that ever leaves their post without being replaced by another officer. Number two, Jeffrey Dahmer, they knew he was at risk. They knew that something was going to happen to him. I do not and cannot, I cannot understand why Jeffrey Dahmer was given the job of a janitor to begin with, where he would be in the population. And number two, you can bet, and I will tell you, that mop or broom handle that supposedly Jeffrey was beat with was not used to beat Jeffrey over the head. They did to Jeffrey what Jeffrey did to the other boys that he took care of. My sympathy is for the families and the victim, but I will tell you right now, Jeffrey Dahmer had no business being out in the population. Those officers had no business leaving their post, and especially with having an inmate that was hated as much as Jeffrey Dahmer was hated. Jeffrey Dahmer should have been, quote, unquote, in isolation, period.
So you're alleging a conspiracy?
Yes, I am. If you want to know the truth, yes, I am.
Mr. and Mrs. Dahmer?
There's more than one person involved in this, we feel. Everyone must remember, please again, our sympathies have always been with the families. We did not commit the crimes. We stand by our son, we stood by him, but we grieve for these families and with these families.
From the audience?
Yeah, my name's Janetta Robinson. I've worked with the families and saw their pain and their suffering, and especially when your book came out, and most of these are poor people. Since you say you have compassion for the families, in the book it said that you were giving the money to the families. You did not give the money to the families. Now, could you, as an act of love, share part of those proceeds with the families?
When there are proceeds, they will be shared.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
When there are proceeds, they will be shared. I don't think any of you in here truly realize what happens in a book situation.
Well, they gave you advance. I know it was written that they did give you an advance, and I know in the book you stated that you gave it to them.
Let me just say this, understand. We will speak to any of the family members at any time, anywhere. We don't need intermediaries. I'm sorry, Janetta, we can speak directly to them. But he is bound by contract and by legal obligations not to discuss certain details of the book. So I'm sorry, we can't discuss it. It's been discussed
We have
before.
taught people how to love the person and hate the act. Thou should not kill. So Miss Lacey, Miss Hughes, who I'm present work with, they don't feel any hatred and all that. So that's not about that. But I would think when we do feel compassion and we do feel the loss, that now is an opportunity to do something that is healing, and giving is healing.
Janetta,
and we have not seen that.
We love these people. We don't deny them their pain, their grief, their anger, whether it's directed towards us, towards Jeff. We understand. We cannot change what has happened. We love.
And we'll be back.
Do you understand me?
We'll be back in just a minute.
Show it in action.
We'll be back.
This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both. Now I believe I was sick.
City, we are talking about the life and death of serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. I'd like you now to meet two mothers whose sons were both murdered by Jeffrey Dahmer. Catherine Lacey lost her 23-year-old son Oliver, and Shirley Hughes lost her 31-year-old son Tony, both at the hands of Jeffrey Dahmer. I'd like to welcome both of you to the show today. When you first heard the news that Jeffrey Dahmer had been murdered in prison, what did your family do?
Well, it was a shock to me. I wasn't expecting, to hear anything like that,
Was it a sense of relief? Does that make any difference to you, Shirley?
Well, it makes a difference because I don't believe in gloating over the death of someone, I'm glad he did. I just wished he had lived, and could be reminded of the things that he done. And so far as my family, we give our sympathy to the Dahmer family because I know now they know how we feel, and they'll continue to know how we feel, how we grieve over our loved ones. No, I don't believe in, gloating over someone. I wouldn't wish death on anyone, I just wished he could have lived and let him be reminded of what he done.
Is this the first time you have seen the Dahmers?
No. We met before in court. I have seen them in court.
Here's the chance. You say that you feel for the victims' families. There's something that you all have in common now. You've all lost sons. What do you say to each other in moments like this?
I think on an intellectual level, back at the trial, I felt your pain, but I feel it ever so much deeply, right down to the bottom of my heart and gut right now. I feel it totally. And I thank you for your comments, both of you, Shirley. You said you wished he had lived. I wished he had lived too, for the prime reason that he was, and I don't know what kind of an audience we have here, whether it's largely secular or there's something deeper here.
Mm-hmm.
But Jeff was actually evangelizing at the prison, handing out different religious material, much to the consternation of
Catherine, does that make you feel better to hear that the past year Jeffrey Dahmer had turned to the Lord?
No, like I said, I was in shock. Okay, I could say, you know, my son too, he was very religious, which I had told the newspaper. I wanted to ask his family when I seen his mother and his father, why come you didn't get him any help, you know, when you seen things that was going on with Jeffrey?
What things did you see?
The things that I saw, at what period of time are you talking about? Because the only thing I ever saw was extreme shyness when he was a youngster.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when he was arrested for the molestation case, that was the first time that I ever knew that he had real problems, but I had no idea at all of the depth of these problems. And as a matter of fact, we did get help for him. I went to a psychologist with him and set up the initial appointments.
Mm-hmm. From the audience.
That was basically the question I wanted to ask you. When Jeffrey was growing up, were there any indication of abnormal behavior, or did he have problems in school, or what about his friends, or was he a loner? Why weren't you aware of some of these things when he was growing up?
This is the question I asked. How come I didn't know about the road kills, the pet cemetery, the drinking in school? And I'm telling you, we sat at the trial and learned for the first time everything. Now, it's hard to...
But please keep in mind, he was not in the home the last 2 years. Sadly, when Jeff was in high school, due to a tumultuous marriage and a pending divorce, Lionel was ordered out of the house. That is not an excuse, but you must understand he was not there to see what was happening those last 2 years in school when Jeff was getting in trouble and no one was bringing it home to the family.
Let's continue this conversation right after this. We'll be right back. I'm coming over to you.
Something of the person with me. I kept the mummified head and skull of one of the victims in a carrying case in my locker at work.
I just wanted to say that it seems like a lot of people in this audience are just picking up little bits and pieces of what they heard, and my heart really goes towards the families of the victims, and my heart also really goes towards the Dahmers, and it seems like we're all passing judgment on something that we don't even know totally about or anything, and the man accepted, as what his dad said, accepted Jesus in his heart. And that means he's forgiven, and if you can't forgive him, God has, so it's up to God.
Hold on.
Yeah, Mike.
Wait, what are you saying over here? Come here.
If you got 990 years left, what else you have in your heart? What else could you do in jail? What you gonna do?
So you're saying it? Yes, I'm sorry.
My question is to the parents. All the stuff that was remaining in the house, you wasn't aware of the killings that he convicted and he was doing if you were so close to your son. I don't understand.
My understanding is that the Dahmers actually went to visit. I mean, in interviews that I've seen with Jeffrey Dahmer, he has talked about how you came to visit, and he had 11 years of bodies there, and you didn't even know.
No, afraid not. You're wrong. You have to understand, he lived out of state. We were in his apartment one time. If you knew someone was coming, wouldn't you clean up your place?
No.
Come on. There was no drum. There was no evidence whatsoever. So, you know, folks, I'm sorry.
Yeah. He had body parts locked up in refrigerators and trunks.
Not then,
everything.
he did not. Not then.
Okay.
It seems like I think the justice system is I don't know what to say about it, because he's been killing people for so many years, and it seems like every time you go to prison, you gain religion when you didn't do it before. And I think he should have been delivered to the public and get the same thing the people felt.
Mr. Mr. and Mrs. Dahmer, how do you feel about the things found in his home being auctioned off to help out the families now that he's been murdered?
I think what they're probably going to do, whoever does this, if it happens, they're going to create a museum in Milwaukee. This is just what I think. Or a little Milwaukee somewhere, and it's going to perpetuate all of the hurts. They're going to get all the artifacts that they can and set up this museum forever.
As here's some of the things that would be in that auction: the pail, the refrigerator, the drills, the saws, the hypodermic needles, those types of things. Shirley, when you hear that, and Catherine, what is your thought about that?
For me, I just, you know, I'm not off into that. I don't think about that. The Lord made a way for me to live before my son died, and he's going to make a way for me now, so I'm not off into that.
What type of therapy did you get for your son when he was getting into all of this trouble? You said at school.
Well,
And the Pet Cemetery. I'm sure you all were aware of this?
no, we weren't aware of it at all. And I wondered, why wasn't I aware? And in talking with Jeff, I found out...
Was his mother aware of it? If she was she living with him at that time?
She was living with him.
Was she aware of this? I don't believe
I don't think so at all, no. But what I want to say was this so-called pet cemetery was located about a quarter of a mile away, as I later found out, on someone else's property.
From the
And-
audience.
I was wondering where his real mother is now, and if you have any histories in your family of other similar criminal activities.
Okay, his real mother, as far as, you know, really doing things with him and for him, is sitting right here. His natural mother is in California. And what was the rest of the question?
If you have any other family members in the past
Oh.
that have
They've had
No.
problems like this at
On
all?
my side of the family, I've, you know, checked back to great-grandparents, and there's nothing, not even drunkenness. But see, this is one thing that has not been investigated. Now that Jeff's gone, you know, we'll never have an opportunity for research. That's one disadvantage of what.
And we'll be right back in a minute. We're gonna take a quick break. Yes, you had something to say. Hold on. One last comment before we say goodbye.
I would like to say to the families, I'm sorry you lost your loved ones, but to your son, I wish he was alive, because if he was in jail now, he'll be suffering. He's dead. He got the easy way out. But to the families, I'm so sorry you lost your loved ones.
Okay.
Could I just respond?
Yes, sure, Mr. Dahmer.
I'd like to just respond to that. I agree that he would be suffering. However, no matter what I say, maybe no one will believe me, but as I say again, please ask someone like Teresa for an objective opinion in Milwaukee. Jeff
Okay.
was looking forward to
And we've got to say goodbye. We'll continue talking here, but we'll see you next time on Rolonda. Thanks for being with us today. Go on, Mr.
Well, he was looking, I think he could have done good for people inside and outside.
What do you think of that, Shirley?
And I can't do anything to change the mindset of people that have that.
I think our condolences go out to all of you families who have lost loved ones, and we're behind you.
Hey guys, Manny Cabo here, and you guys might recognize me from a tiny little show on NBC called The Voice, or Telemundo's La Voz, or maybe even one of the lead singers of the Wizards of Winter Christmas Spectacular. I'm here to talk to you guys about Rolonda Watt's masterclass for voiceover artist. I gotta tell you, when I first delved into this industry, so many of my friends would say, Manny, you wanna learn voiceovers, you gotta take Ro's class. And they hit the nail on the head with this one. Because after the 6-week intensive masterclass, not only did I feel inspired and empowered, but above all educated with all the latest trends and tips and techniques from industry professionals that Rolonda will bring on to showcase to help you leverage your skills as well. So folks, if you're looking to really up your game and delve into the voiceover world, then take Rolonda Watt's masterclass. You'll be glad you did. And Rolonda, thank you so much for inspiring me to continue to do the things that I love with my voice. You're a rock star. And for those of you out there looking for the best voiceover masterclass, Rolonda's the way to go. Oh, and by the way, you're welcome. Take care, guys, and good luck.
Hey y'all, just a quick reminder to those of you who are dreaming of a voice acting career that my voice acting masterclass is going to kick back up very soon. So I hope that you will go to Rolonda.com, Rolonda.com, Rolonda. Go check it out. It'll give you all the details and set up a discovery call. I'd love to talk with you and see if you may be a good candidate for the masterclass. So we're starting up very soon. Hey, listen, you've always thought about it. You've always known you have a tremendous voice. Come on, let's put that voice to work. Come on to Rose Vocal Gym and let's see what you can do. I'm going to teach you the aspects of the business, what's happening in the business post-COVID, post-BLM. We're also going to talk about setting up that quiet space and finding the right microphone for you. But my class is really about breaking down and working those scripts, building delicious characters, and building that confidence within yourself. I've had so many successful students, and the one thing they keep talking about is the confidence they had because they knew what they were doing when they got behind that mic in a professional situation. We don't just talk about the show, we talk about the business. And listen, you never know what you can do. You'll never know how good you are unless you try. So stop saying no to yourself. Go on and invest in yourself. Go to Rolonda.com, set up a call. We can talk about it. And let's get you in my next masterclass coming up very soon.